Okay, so first things first, we are going to need a code editor. And I strongly recommend using Visual Studio Code as it's very simple to use and it's really fast and lightweight. You can use PyCharm if you want, it's a great IDE specified for Python programming language, but it takes more space and it's really slow to load the whole project of yours and more complex to use. So I'm going to choose Visual Studio Code and I will leave the installer download the resources of this course. But if you want to download it yourself, just go to your browser and type VS Code download and click on the first one and simply download installer for Windows. So after the installer is downloaded, just click on it, and of course we read the agreement and we accept it, and then we click on next, and you can choose your directory if you want. I'm just keep it by default. As you can see, it takes only more than 300 megabytes of disk space, so it's real lightweight. We click next, and I don't want it to create a start menu folder, then next again, and I recommend clicking here to create a desktop icon, and all the rest keep it as it is. And if you want to change something, just don't change this. Keep this add to path requirement. Then click on next again and we install it. And after our installation is done, we choose launch Visual Studio Code and we click finish. And now what we are going to need to do is we are going to need to install a Python programming language. So I will leave the resources in the course description, but if you wanted to do it by yourself, go to your browser again and type Python download. You go on this side, and now what we are going to do, we're going to be looking for version 3.9.2, and when you find the version 3.9.2, just click on download and scroll all the way to the bottom. And if you have 64-bit Windows, you download this installer, and if you have 32-bit Windows, you download this installer. So I have 64 and I'm going to download this one. And after the download is done, just click on the installer. And now what we need to do is we need to click on this to add Python 3.9 to path, and if you want you can install it to all users. It's recommended because, well, you can make some system errors if you don't. And then you go to customize installation, and let's see, yes, keep all these boxes checked. Then you click on next, we click install, yes, and now we wait for Python to install. And after the installation is done, we just click on close, and we have everything ready except one thing. Now on Visual Studio Code, we need to go to extensions and type in Python, and here we go. We have the first one, it's by Microsoft, and we just click install. And after it's installed, we are going to close our Visual Studio Code. Okay, so now after we have everything installed and everything ready to go, what you want to do is to create a new folder for your voice assistant. I'm just going to name mine Voice Assistant, because we're going to have a few of separate Python files and even other kinds of files for our program. And after you created the folder, just open your Visual Studio Code, go here to Explorer and select open folder, and now you want to navigate to where your voice assistant's folder is. So mine's on desktop, and just select it and select folder. Here we go. And what you actually want to do now is to go to file and check this option. It simply just auto saves your code, so you won't have to do it manually after any minor adjustment you made. And now what you want to do is to create a new file, so you can either click here on just double click here and go to File, Save As, and save a Python file in your Voice Assistants folder. I'm going to name mine Engine, because we are going to create a function in this file that makes our assistant to actually speak to us. And you must add .py extension, because otherwise this file just won't work with Python programming language. And then you click Save. So now what you want to do is to install a library. And we are going to be installing Python text-to-speech library. So it basically just makes any text that we input for our program to actually speak. So how you're going to do this is just go and open your command prompt and type pip install pyttsx3. I already have it, so yeah, you can see requirement already satisfied. And there actually can be a problem with this, that it won't install, or it shows it installed but it won't work. So if this happens, what you want to do is go and open your app data folder, go to local, find programs folder, and open Python, and here you want to open scripts. So this is a directory where all of your Python libraries is kept, and you just click here and type cmd, and you're going to want to do the same thing here, pip install pyttsx3. And after you've done this, if the first method didn't work out for you, this one should. Okay, so first things first, we are going to create a function that actually makes our assistant to speak to us. So we already installed pyttsx3 library, so you will want to go to your engine.py file and just simply import the library. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable called engine, and we are going to use this variable in our function to call another functions from the library. And here we are going to pass the parameter audio to our function, and this parameter basically will be a string that we will give this function to speak out to us. And now we are going to set property of a speech rate. So what this will do is this, well, basically it's going to make our assistant speak either faster or slower. And if this number is bigger, our assistant is going to speak faster, and if it's smaller, it's going to speak slower. Now we are going to call the function that actually makes the program to speak the audio, and we are going to add another line of code to run and wait. And now to actually call this function, we'll just simply type its name and pass the parameter to audio. So let's type hello world and let's run the program.
Hello world.
Now let's try something else.
Hello students, and good luck.
Okay, you see that it works pretty fine. Now we might want to use a different voice. So for this, we are going to create another variable called voices, and we are going to get the voices currently installed in our computer system from Microsoft as a list. So to do that, we're going to get a property called voices. And to see what voices do you have installed on your computer, just simply go to settings and choose time and language. Then go to speech, scroll down a little bit, and here you will see installed voice packages. So you can use some of them you currently have, or you can just go and install another one. And these voice packages consist of various languages and even accents. So you can find whatever you want and install it. Just to notice, if you install, for example, a Sweden language and try to use English text, it won't work. And now actually to get a voice from the list, we are going to write another line of code. So we are going to set property, voice, and we are going to call our variable and choose the element of the list. So 0 is for first, 1 is for second, and so on. So let's go with the first element of the list.
Hello students, and good luck.
Let's try the second element of the list.
Hello students, and good luck.
As you can see, the voice changes. And as I said before, it depends on how many voice packages do you install. And just simply go and change the voice's ID. So change the current element of the list to find what voice suits you the best. Okay, so now we are going to create a function that handles any kind of error that can occur in our program while it's running. So for example, let's say you have 3 different functions for your voice assistant. And one function is to tell you the current time, the second one is to tell you the current date, and the third one is to tell you the weather. So let's imagine that you don't know nothing about it, but while you run the program, there is an error in the time function. And when you try to ask your assistant to tell you the time, the whole program just crashes and doesn't work anymore until you fix the problem. So to bypass this, we're going to create a function that handles any kind of error, and it will work like a bulletproof corpus to prevent our program from crashing. So let's say with this function, if the error occurs in time function and you ask your assistant to tell you the time, instead of crashing, our assistant will just say that there's an error there, go to your error log file and check what's wrong. And instead of crashing, our program is going to keep running and do anything else that that doesn't have any errors in it. So to start, we're going to import a couple of libraries. The first one is datetime and the second one is OS. So to import these, you won't need to install anything, it's built in Python. And to put it together, datetime library simply lets you do any kind of stuff with date and time formats. And OS library is just an operating system library. It lets you to, for example, start a file, look for that file in any directory or in the whole computer, check if directory exists or if the file exists, and all similar kind of stuff. So to create this function, well, it's not exactly a function, but we are going to use it in most parts of our code. And to create this, we're going to be using try and exception block. So basically what this will do, in try section, it's going to first try to run the code that we provided. And if that code fails, it's gonna go to exception part of the block, and it will try to run that part of the code. So, well, it's more like do this, and if you fail, do that. So first we're going to create a variable called unnamed exception and make it to false. And then we are going to use a datetime library to get the name for our text documents that will be created in our error log. So for example, when error occurs, there's a new file created in our error log folder, and the name of the file will be the datetime format that we choose. And the format will be just basically year, month, day, hour, minutes, and seconds. And now we're going to create the exception part of this block. So you want to name your exception as specific as possible. So for example, if you're creating a time function and you want your program to try do this, and if it fails, accept exception, don't ever name your exception as E. I've seen a ton of tutorials that simply creates try except block and just names their exception as a simple letter E. So just as error. You want to be specific as possible with this, because when you try to fix the error, you're just, let's say you have 1000 lines of code and you have a bunch of try except blocks and every single one of them is named as E. So you can imagine how hard it's going to be to find where that error is. So be as specific as possible with your names, And in this case, I'm going to name this exception as datetime exception. And now what we want to do is we want to make our name exception variable as true. And now we are going to go to our voice assistants folder and create a new folder called error log. And in this folder, we are going to create two separate folders, one for labeled exceptions or labeled errors, and another one for unlabeled exceptions or unlabeled errors. And now we're going to use an open function. So basically this function just opens the file that you show it to, or if that file doesn't exist, it creates it. So what we want to do now is we want to show that directory where that file should be. So in this case, if unnamed exception is true, we wanted to create an unlabeled error. So our directory is going to be errorlog / unlabeled errors / and now we are going to give the name of the file. So it's daytimeexception.txt, and we want to make this file writable. So when you open or create any new files for a program to write in or read, you actually have a few different options. So this one we're currently using is write to the file, this one is read the file, and this one is do both, write and read. So I'm going to stick with write. So now we want to write to our file, and we want to write a string of our exception. So we call that datetime exception. And then we want to close the file. That's it. And now we want to make our program to actually count how many files in unlabeled errors we have. So we firstly create a variable called exceptions count, and we make it to a 0. And then we are going to create a for loop. So for error log in os.scan directory, and we are going to pass our directory in here. And if error log is file, so that means if there's any files in our log, we are going to make exceptions count plus equals to 1. So basically this would mean that if we have 5 files in our unlabeled errors directory, so that means that our for loop is going to iterate exact amount of times of the files in that directory, and is going to return how many files we have in that directory. And now to implement this, let's implement this in our speech function. So to do this, you just simply want to press tab on all your code and just create a new try except block. And of course be as specific as possible with exceptions name. So in my case, I'm just going to name it speech exception. And now if a named exception is true, we are going to create a new file. And if a named exception is not true, we're going to create another file in another directory. So in this case, labeled errors. And then we leave the if block and we simply write the speech exception as string to the file, and we close the file. And there you have it. So now let's print that there was an error, and let's try out the program. So let's call our speech function.
Hello guys.
And they haven't created any error log files. So now let's sabotage our speech function. And let's try to run it again. As you can see, it printed out that there is an error with speech and that the program created an error file. As you can see, unlabeled errors is empty, and there we have it. So let's open it up and let's see. So here we go. Name voices is not defined, and it's true because we edited the variable and we deleted the s from it. So as you can see, we have an error in 24th line. And now let's see what happens if you sabotage datetime library. Okay, seems I have an error. Let's check. Yes, I forgot to pass the right here. Let's try again. And as you can see, we have an error with speech again, and it created a file. So yes, labeled errors doesn't have any new files. Let's check unlabeled ones. And there you have it, datetime exception and unnamed exception number 1. So that's basically it. And you can run this again. So as you can see, it creates new files and it makes a number for them. So we're not going to have that kind of problem that some part of log is deleted by a new file. We are going to have a full history of them. So now, to not make any errors, let's fix our code. Let's try to sabotage something else. Let's run the program. Let's check our labeled errors. As you can see, no new files in unlabeled ones, and here we have name engine is not defined. So it's actually true because we deleted the E. And that's basically it. So now we have a bulletproof corpus for our program, and it's not going to crash if there's any errors in it. Okay, so now we actually are going to create some new tasks for our voice assistant to execute. And for this, you want to create a separate Python file. And name it whatever you like. In my case, I'm going to name it tasks.py. And the first task we are going to create is just a simple tell me the time function. So for that, we're going to need datetime library, and we are going to need to import a random library. Now this library is pre-installed in Python, so you don't need anything to install here. And now from our engine file, we're going to import speech error date, and we're going to create a new function called current time. And now of course we have to create a try except block to secure our code from any errors. And now we're going to get the current time using the same line of code we used while creating error handling. So in this case I'm going to use hours and minutes only as the format, and if you want to use something else, just go ahead. There's tons of different formats. For example, you can make your assistant to speak hours with PM or AM. You can make him speak only 12-hour clock, a 24-hour clock, and everything else. Now we're going to create a list of different answers, so our assistant could be more different with those answers and don't repeat itself. Make sure that while you're creating the list, you always separate each line with a comma. And don't be afraid to actually experiment with this. Add more answers, make them to sound as you like. Just be yourself and do what's good for you. After all, we are creating a personal voice assistant, not some kind of Google or Siri or anything like that. So now we are going actually to randomize the answers in the list. And I'm actually going to change the name of our speech function to speak, because I like it more. It's simpler to type. And now after we got our answer, we need to finish the accept exception block, and let's call it time exception. And of course we're doing the same thing here that we did in our engine.py file. And yes, I forgot to actually import a name exception because, well, you need to import that because otherwise this method won't work. So if a named exception is true, we are going to create a file in unnamed or unlabeled errors, whatever you call that folder. And in the other case, we are going to create the error in labeled errors folder. And then we are going to write our exception to that file as a string, and we are going to close the file. So that's it. Now let's make our assistant to speak that there was an error. And now let's test our function out. So let's call it.
It's 1417.
And as you can see, it works. Let's run it again.
It's currently 1418.
So everything is fine and everything works. Now let's see what if an error occurs. So let's sabotage
There was an
our
error.
code, as I like to say.
Try again later.
And now let's check our error log folder. It should be in labeled ones. And yes, we have a new error and get time is not defined. And about this PyCache folder, well, it's just a folder generated by Python automatically. Just ignore it if it's in your directory. You can delete it, it won't change anything. Once you run the program, it will just create a new one. But it has no effect on your code or your program or anything else. So just ignore it and leave it be. Okay, so we created the time function and now we're going to create the current day function. And it's pretty simple. It's actually the same as it was before, except we're using a different time format. So in this case, we are going to use A, and that means that we are going to get the day as a full name, because you can have, for example, let's say sun as Sunday, mon as Monday, and so on. So let's create a few answers then and make them different one from each other. And after we got our answers, let's just make a random choice from them and make our assistant to speed them. And of course, we need to use try except here. And let's name our exception as day exception, and let's just copy paste the whole exception block from the function before. So this will make it easier and faster. And now we can run the program.
It's Tuesday.
And you can see that I mentioned the PyCache folder before, so well, I deleted it in the previous lecture and it's here again. So as I mentioned, ignore it, don't worry about it, it's nothing, just don't see it and that's all. And as you can see in my calendar, we have Tuesday actually, so it means the program is working and everything's fine. Okay, we have the time and the day down. Now we are going to make our assistant to get the current months for us. So if you, for example, you are working, writing something down, you can't look at your computer screen, so you can't just ask your assistant to tell you the month. So we are going to be using another format again, and we are going to be using the month format that actually says the full name of the month, because it can be number, it can be abbreviated name, I believe. So let's create some answers here. And let's make a random choice from them to our assistant to speak, and of course let's create the exception block.
It's currently October.
And of course, as you can see, no errors here, and everything is as it should be. Okay, so we have the time, the day, the month, and now we actually are going to create a date. So it's the same as it was before, just changing the format, and I'm actually going to leave the format in the resources of this lecture. I mean all the formats there is, so you can go and test them out and find which suits the best. So for the date, it's the same we used in the engine file. And we are going just to create some answers and then randomize them for our assistant to speak, and of course try and accept block. And now let's run the program.
It's 2022 October 18.
And of course everything is fine. So that's it for the boring part, I guess. Now we are going to create some even, well, not even, we are going to create some better and some more impressive functions and tasks for our assistant to execute. Alright, so we are going to create a coin flip game. So basically you will ask your assistant to flip the coin, and it's going to make the sound of coin falling on the desk, and your assistant will speak well, whether if the coin landed on heads or on tails. So let's just go. We don't need to import anything here because we already got the random library. We are going to need to install the play sound library, but we are going to get to that later. So let's just create a function first, and let's create some answers to know that our assistant is actually going to flip the coin. And then of course we randomize the answers. And now we're going to import the play sound library. So of course we need to install it. So let's just open our command prompt and install it. Okay, so now we actually need to create a new folder in our voice assistants folder, and let's name it sound effects. Now just open your browser and go and search coin flip sound effect or something like that. I found this Pixabay site and has some free to download sound effects. Well, it has tons of them. So I'm just going to download the coin flip sound. And after you downloaded it, just paste it in your sound effects folder and rename it so it can be much easier to access in the program. And now we're going to write playSound.playSound and give the directory of the sound effect and the name. And now we're going to create a list of coin sides, so it's heads or tails. And we're going to get the random result with random library. And now we're going to create some different answers, so it won't be the same every time. And we are going to make our assistant speak that random answer for us. And of course, try except block. So let's run the program now.
Let's flip it. There was an error. Try again later.
Okay, so we have an error. So to fix this error, you want to open your command prompt and type pip install playsound 1.2.2. So we actually need to use another version of playsound because this one has some corrupted files in it. Okay,
Tossing the coin. It's tails. Let's flip it. It's heads.
okay, so we have the coin flip down, and now we're going to create a dice roll minigame. So it's actually pretty much the same. You just need to change your answers a bit, and of course, we are not going to use coin sides and coin flip sound effect. So let's just create the answers and then make a random choice from them. And let's create a list of dice points. And now we're going to use the random library to get the result. And make our assistant to speak the result. And of course, try except blah here. And now we're going to get the dice roll effect. So Pixabay, once again, it's a really good site. Let's just get into our folder and let's rename it. And now simply just use the playsound.playsound and the directory and the name of the file. And let's run the program.
Okay. It's 5. Okay. I rolled 6.
Okay, so what if you have a bad mood? What if you're sad? You can ask your assistant to tell you a joke, of course. So we are going to create a jokes function, and for this one we have actually two choices. The first one is simply create a list of jokes and just write them down. So it can be anything, for example, your favorite jokes or any dark humor or something like that. And when you write them down, just we use what we used in coin flip, dice roll, or just to randomize the answers we want. So it's simply speak and random that choice from the jokes list. And that's all. However, if you want some more geeky jokes or more, I don't know, programmer jokes, simply just install PyJokes library and then import it to your task.py file. And instead we're going just to speak pyjokes.getJokes.
Complaining about the lack of smoking shelters, the nicotine-addicted Python programmers said there ought to be spaces for tabs. Ubuntu users are apt to get this joke. Obfuscated reality mappers, ORMs, can be useful database tools. Asked to explain Unicode during an interview, Jeff went into detail about his final year university project. He was not hired. Triumphantly, Beth removed Python 2.7 from her server in 2030.
Okay, so I realized I made a mistake here. It's actually get joke, not jokes.
Why do Java programmers have to wear glasses? Because they don't see sharp. Hip, hip, hip hip hooray. Hardware, the part of a computer that you can kick.
Okay, so now we're going to do something much more complex and, well, just bear with me in this lecture and do what I do. You can try to experiment if you want, but we're going to be creating a blackjack minigame with actual betting system. So if you ever feel bored or you want to gamble and don't lose any real money, just play with your assistant. So for this we are going to create a new folder and we are going to call it notes because we are going to be storing a few notes for our program in this folder. And let's create a new text document and let's just call it Blackjack tokens. So now let's create the Blackjack function and let's create a list of cards. So of course we have 2, 3, 4 all the way to the 10, and then we have Jack, Queen, King and Ace. And we will want to copy and paste this line 3 times so we have more variety with the cards while we are playing. And now we're going to create a few variables. So the first two is to check if the player or the dealer is still in the game. And we are going to use them later. And of course we have to create two separate and empty lists. And one is going to be player hand and the other is going to be dealer hand. Okay, and now we're going to check if the Blackjack tokens document that we have has anything in it. So for example, if it's empty, the program is going to add a few tokens by default to the player, and if the file is not empty, well, the program is just going to skip this piece of code. So to do that, we are going to use os and os.stat and just give the directory and the name of the file. And if the size of the document is equals to 0, we are going to add some tokens to the file. So we need to open the document as balance, and then we are creating a variable, let's call it default tokens. And then we are going to write the amount of tokens to the file as a string. And else we are going just to pass this. And well, of course, there can be other things. So for example, you lost all of your tokens and you have 0 of them in that document, but the program is not going to see that file as empty. So in this case, we are going to read the document, and if the balance is 0, we are going to add default tokens again. And else we are going just to pass this. So of course we are going to get the tokens as an integer, and if tokens is less or equal to 0, we are going to add 2 tokens by default. And now we're going to create a few functions in this function. These functions are going to be based on if-else logic. So if the player won, we are going to add his betted tokens in Blackjack tokens document. So how many tokens the player won is based on how much he betted. And don't worry about this error here, we are going to create the betting function later, so let's just leave it be. And of course we are going to write the amount to the file. And now what we want to do is we want to create a function that takes out the betted amount of the Blackjack tokens document. Well, we are doing this because it's easier. If the player loses, he doesn't get anything and tokens are already taken out. And it's more realistic this way because, for example, if you see that you're going to bust or something like that, you can just, well, kill the program and you won't lose anything. And in the other case, well, you bet, let's say you have 4 tokens, you bet 2 of them, and while the program is running, it's going to take out 2 tokens of your balance. And if you win them, you're going to get those 2 back plus the other 2. In the other case, you're going to have 2 tokens left. As simple as that. Okay, so we have to create the last function, and well, this function is going to be called if the player is pushed in the game. Pushed means that the player has 20 and the dealer gets 20, so they have the same number, and that means that player's betted amount of tokens is just simply going back to his balance. And well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So now we're going to create a function to actually deal card, and we're going to pass the parameter, and well, I'm going to name it drawn card. And with random.choice, we're going just to pick a random card from our cards list. And we are going to append that card to drawn card parameter, and we're going to remove the dealt card from our cards list. I hope this makes sense. So if it doesn't, I'm going to go through it again. So what we are doing first, we are taking the random card from our list, and then we are appending that card to the parameter here we just created. We are going to pass this parameter to another function later, and then we are removing the drawn card from our list. And now we're going to create another function that actually counts the current score that we have. So here we're going to create a logic for aces. I don't know if you know this, but in Blackjack, aces are counted as 1 or as 11. For example, let's say you have, let's say 8 and you get an ace. So you're going to have 19. And if you have, let's say, a king and you get an ace, you're going to have 21. But if you have ace and you get another ace, you're going to have 22. So in that case where you can get, well, let's say you have 2 kings, for example, and you are getting an ace. So in this case, it's going to be worth only 1 for not causing you to bust in the game. And of course, I am no expert at Blackjack rules, so if you want to get some more information on that, just simply go and Google it. And it will be much clearer for you this way. Okay, so we are going to create a variable that makes our score equal to 0 and ace 11. We are going to make that equal to 0 as well, because we're going to count how many aces are in each hand. So now for every card in drawn card, and if that card is in range 11, we're going to make our score plus equals to card. So that score is going to be equal to the card current score if that card is in range to 11. So that means it's not above 11, because if it is, well, and if you get another ace, you're just going to bust. And else if card is in jack, queen or king, we are going to make our score plus equals to 10. And else, well, just score plus equals 11. Make our aces count, so we are showing to our program that we already have 1 ace. And now while ace 11 and score is more than 21, well, we are going to use score minus equals to 10 and ace 11 minus equals to 1. And then we are going to return the score. And now we're going to create a function that actually reveals dealer's hand to us. So if length dealer hand is equals to 2, we are going to return the dealer hand. And else, if dealer hand is more than 2, we are going to return more cards of the dealer hand. And now we are going to create another for loop. So in this one, well, it's a little bit different. I believe if you programmed some time before, or at least you have seen the for loops in different programming languages. For example, in Java, it's for I equals to 0 or some other variable or a list or anything like that, and then we write that double comma. I don't know how it's called in English. So we write I is less than n and then I plus plus. So to actually use this kind of for loop in Python, we are going to use underscore instead of an I. And underscore in this case means that, we are just not using any kind of variable or anything like that. And then we write range, in which range we want our program to do something. So for example, let's say we want our program to add some kind of element to the list 5 times. We're going to write for underscore in range 5. And if you wanted to add that element 6 times, we are going to use range 6 times and so on. So in our case, if for underscore in range 2, we're going to deal the card to the dealer hand and we're going to deal the card to the player hand. And then while true, so that means while the loop is running, we are going to ask the player to put the bet and we're going to show the player how many tokens does he have. And we are going to define the bet as variable and as integer in the input. And if bet is more than tokens, we are going to say that the player doesn't have enough tokens. And if the bet is less or equals to 0, we are going to say to the player that he can't bet negative amounts or 0. And else we are just going to say that we are going to see the amount of tokens betted, and we're going to call the betted tokens function that we can take those tokens out of our Blackjack tokens document. And then we're going to break the while loop. And we are going to create another while loop. So while player playing or dealer playing is true, and if player is still playing, we are going to ask the player to hit or stand. So, and then we are going to give our dealer a little bit of intelligence for not causing the dealer to buzz. So for example, let's say if the dealer has 16 and the player has 15, dealer is just going to deal himself a card until he busts or stands on 21. So if the dealer is going to have more than 16, he is automatically going to stop. So if the dealer score is more than 16, we are going to make that dealer playing is false. And else we are going to make the dealer to deal a card. And then if the player's choice for hit or stand is stand, player playing is going to be false, and else we are just going to deal another card to the player. And now if player score is more or equals to 21, we are going to break the loop, and if dealer score is more or equals to 21, we are going to break the loop too. Okay, and now we're going to create a system to check which, whether the dealer or the player won the game. So, well, if the dealer and the player has the same amount of points, we are going to say that the player was pushed and call the player pushed function. If player score is equals to 21, that means blackjack, hooray, player won. And if dealer is, well, if dealer has 21, then dealer has blackjack, and we are just going to simply, well, we are not going to call any functions because we are already taking out the tokens that the player betted before the game starts. And if the player got more than 21, well, the player busted and he lost some tokens. And if the dealer gets more than 21, hooray, dealer busted, player won. And now we're going to check which one of them has more points, if none of them busted and none of them got the blackjack. So for this one, we are going to subtract the dealer score from the 21, and if it's less than player score subtracted from 21, well, in that case, that means that dealer won. And then we are going to do the same thing, except if dealer score is more than player score, when subtracted from 21, the player is going to win, and we're going to call the player 1 function. Well, and yes, of course we have to use try except block, so I'm going just to press tab on the whole code and create an except function. And now let's run the program.
You don't have any tokens, 2 tokens were added. Place your bet, you have 2 tokens. You bet 2 tokens. Let's play. Dealer has 18. You lost 2 tokens. You don't have any tokens, 2 tokens were added. Place your bet, you have 2 tokens. You bet 2 tokens. Let's play. Blackjack. You won 2 tokens.
Here we go. So we should have 4 tokens by now. Let's check it. And no, we still have 2 tokens. Let's see what's wrong. Oh, I'm actually not showing the dealer's hand, so it's a little harder to play. Yes, here we go. We actually need to write how many tokens did the player won. And I was writing how many tokens the player had until the game began. We are just going to call show dealer hand function right here, just before checking if the player or the dealer is still playing. And now let's just run the program again and try to win some tokens.
Place your bet, you have 2 tokens. You bet 2 tokens. Let's play. Dealer shows 7. Dealer has 19. You won 2 tokens.
Let's check our document again. And yes, we have 4 tokens. So it's working, and let's try again.
Place your bet, you have 4 tokens. You bet 2 tokens. Let's play. Dealer shows ace.
And as you can see, it already took out the betted amount from our Blackjack tokens.
You busted. You lost 2 tokens.
Yes, so in the file we are still having the same 2 tokens because, well, I think it's real simple. We just bet 2 tokens. Those tokens are taken out from our Blackjack tokens file, and if we lose, nothing else happens. and if we win, we are getting back those 2 tokens plus another 2, and if we are pushed, we are just getting back the same amount we betted. Okay, so now we're going to create a function that uses our microphone as input for our voice assistant. So we're going to need to install speech recognition library. And then we are going to import that library. So now let's just create a new function, and I'm going to create it at the top of our code. And in here we're going to create a new variable called recognition. And from the speech recognition library, we are going to get the recognizer. And then with speech recognition.microphone as, let's say, source, we are going to adjust our source or our microphone for ambient noise. And then what you want to do is to make your dynamic energy threshold as false, and well, make energy threshold as 400. And what this will do, it will make your microphone less sensitive to all kinds of noises, but you will need to speak louder or have your microphone closer to you. But this will prevent any kind of disturbance, for example, like a vacuum cleaner vacuuming another room in your house or anything like that. So now we want to print listening to show that our assistant is listening to us and waiting for our command. And then we want to try to recognize the audio, and we are going to put a timeout as 5. So let's say if there was complete silence for 5 seconds, well, then this program is just going to break itself. It's not going to crash, it's just going to finish its work and return nothing. And of course we need to accept some kind of exception. So in this case the exception is going to be that nothing was recorded to the microphone, and if that happened, we are just simply going to pass the whole function. And in other case, we're just going to try to print the recognizing, and then we're going to create a new variable called sentence and use a recognition that recognize Google. So what this will do, it will try to recognize the sentence that we talk into our microphone by Google dataset. So it's just like using a microphone on your browser or something like that. And we want to recognize the audio, and the language is going to be English. I'll leave the list in the languages in the resources, so you can go and check that out. And of course we need to accept the exception, and if exception occurs and our assistant doesn't understand anything what we're saying, so in this case you can, I don't know, for let's say you make a mistake and you choose English as the language to recognize, and you talk in your native language. So in this case our assistant of course is not going to understand anything and is going to raise an error here. So we try accept, we are just going to pass that error and return nothing. And if everything is okay, we're going to return the actual sentence that our assistant recognized. So of course we need to use try except block if that library fails us. And that's basically it, and we're going to test this out in other lectures when we are going to create functions that actually uses the speech recognition.